Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Science Rundown, the podcast where we discuss current regulatory complexities facing the life science industry and explore innovative ways to overcome those challenges. I am your host, Nicholas Catman, President and CEO of the FDA Group. Before we get started, here's a quick word about who we are. The FDA Group is a consulting firm that helps life science companies in the areas of regulatory submissions, audit projects, mock inspections, staff augmentation, and remediation. So if you're finding yourself in need, just head over to the FDAgroup.com to check us out and get in touch. So today I'm speaking with Nelly Viseux. I know I tried my best. I tried my best.
You're doing
Nelly,
great.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
You. Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
Absolutely. So before we jump in, would you kindly introduce yourself?
Yes, so Nelly Viseux, I'm currently working at Regeneron. I am the Vice President of Cell Therapy Development, Manufacturing, Supply, and Quality. I have about 20 years of experience in biotechnology, worked at large company on recombinant protein for about half of my career, Shire, Biogen, Baxter, then moved into the startup world where I tackled nanoparticle. I made a switch to cell and gene therapy, and I've been working in that field for over 10 years now. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm happy to talk from that perspective.
Excellent. So today we're going to talk about how can leaders in the biotech industry, especially in cell and gene therapies, build resilient organizations to tackle innovation and the demands of development to bring medicines to market. So we have a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. So we're going to jump right into it. So first, how do leaders define organizational resilience within the unique scientific, regulatory, and operational demands of cell and gene therapy development?
Yeah, so maybe first to put some context around the question, I'm going to talk about cell therapy, cell and gene therapy. For me, they are interchangeable for this particular discussion. I will not make a differentiation. Cell therapy in general it's not necessarily new. We don't have a lot of approved product yet compared to potentially other modalities, but it's a fast evolving, it's a very competitive field, and it's a biologically complex field. And so that actually MD&T is in terms of the resilience of an organization. And so for me, I translate organizational resilience into adaptability. Adaptability, the capacity to absorb change and to actually anticipate those changes. So in the question, we talk about regulatory changes. We need to be working with the regulatory agencies to actually get the product to patients. And that's important that we actually have that back and forth communication. For the most part, we can anticipate or at least foresee some of the changes that we will be facing. That's a little bit easier. On the operational side, changes are under the control of the person who actually is at the helm of the company and the people who are working at the company. So I would assume that the resilience is pretty much can be embedded into the organization. For the scientific part, that's the part that is, as any modality, the unknown. At some point, a product works or doesn't work. And so when I actually embedded a fundamental reorganization a couple of years ago when as 270, before we got bought by Regeneron, I did a reorganization. I wanted to build an organization that was able to continue to develop and sustain changes and sustain the adaptability, and really absorb those changes while keeping the mission and the vision going. And so that's what we're going to be, I think, talking about in more details.
Okay, excellent. What cultural attributes most strongly predict a biotech organization's ability to innovate and adapt during clinical and regulatory uncertainty?
So I would say the first one is integrity. Integrity to the data, integrity to the mission, the vision, and the values of the company. The fundamentals need to be clear and present for everybody. And I'm not talking about things on the wall. I'm talking about really values that are being lived by the people in the organization. Building on that, transparency of information, of issues, of knowledge, and priorities, because in the sense of we need to, again, develop products that go to patients, we need to be able to talk about what is going on. And that applies to regulatory agencies. There's an engagement and a communication back and forth that we can do with the agencies that actually drive this. Communication, therefore, builds on transparency and goes back to accountability, ability to actually follow through on what you're actually trying to implement. I think that psychological safety is what I'm hitting about, and in the context of authenticity. And so a principle, the way I'm looking at a biotech organization for this is kind of maybe a cell by itself, okay? It's a dynamic environment. It's a living organism. And a driving principle that we use is empowerment. That's why I'm relying mostly on transparency, on information to try to empower the people who are doing the work in the organization to make the best decision without too much escalation or too much control and management.
Yeah. Well, that's a good lead into the next topic, which is how can biotech leaders balance scientific ambition with operational discipline to avoid overextension while still driving breakthrough innovation?
Yes. And, there's a tension inherently between innovation and execution. And I think that it's safe to say that tension exists in startup mode, but it's also in established corporation. It's not exactly the same flavor of the tension, but everybody has to face the same question. And it is starting with an intention, the intention that innovation is present in what we do. And I'm talking about scientific and technical innovation that is going to drive better product, but I'm also talking about innovation from the operational excellence standpoint. And that's something that is embedded into the organization that I lead and is really paramount into getting something done where we actually can continue to innovate. So I was referring earlier to a reorganization that I did in the sense of how do you absorb change? Pipeline may change, product may die. How do you continue to engage the workforce? How do you continue to make product and develop and continue on the path of giving modalities to patients? So we created a system where we have a portion of the company who is working on innovation. But that portion of the company sometimes is also working on pipeline execution. And then we have an operational piece of the organization that is solely dedicated to the operation piece. So if you think about the component of a department like mine, it's about the development groups are doing blue sky innovation, and then doing the necessary development work that is going to lead to the implementation into the manufacturing suite that we control, into the quality lab, QC lab that we actually work with. And so the story is there, and there's a cycle happening with each product that we're moving forward. The innovation is happening, and often we can decide, we gate when the innovation is going to actually be implemented into the execution pipeline. And that is what I call an intentional innovation crossover. We decide the innovation is ready. We can take the risk of bringing it in, and we can produce the data when we're filing or we're engaging the agencies to saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're changing, and this is why we are confident on our decision.
Let's dive a little deeper into that. So what organizational structures or team models best support rapid iteration, cross-functional decision-making, and scientific agility in cell and gene therapy?
So we have the manufacturing facility has been built as an ecosystem. We created a manufacturing team, a quality control lab. We have a quality organization. And we're leveraging the expertise of a facility group or an IT group. This is not separated from the rest of the organization because the expertise exists in those groups, and we don't necessarily want to recreate a different system. But that needs to bring the ecosystem together and have a way of working that actually is consolidated across all functions. We have a system of tiers where we do escalation day-to-day activities that are subsequently, depending on the cruciality and the issues that might be at stake, is being escalated throughout the system. And that allows us to have empowerment of the tiers, but also visibility and influence if we need to for consultation. We also have rapid response team. And I think this is not a new concept where there is a big issue. We already know because we have designed the process that a rapid response team is going to come in and actually intervene, which in cell and gene therapy, when the turnaround time is really, really crucial and the patient is waiting, we need that response. So you build the agility by communication, by channeling the integration and really putting processes that actually facilitate this type of interaction and rapid response.
Okay.
Also, we're learning intensely, okay? Every single operation, batch, things that have happened is at the end of a production, we go back and revisit and learn and improve on the processes. And we report regularly on our improvement and our metrics. That's for the more operational piece of things. On the product development side, the matrix still works. Functional head, own the innovation, gate the data and saying it's ready, it's not ready. And then the CMC team comes on top of that and saying, okay, I am coming with that project. What can you give me? Very early on, what we do is we have an engagement meeting with research that we can anticipate what they're going to come up with as an idea. And we can figure out what type of innovation that we are thinking of working is actually more suited for this that might be coming down the pipeline. And for us, it's kind of intentional innovation that we may or may not decide to actually bring onto the manufacturing floor or the QC lab when it's time to do it.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's switch over to risk. So, how do biotech companies manage and prioritize risk? Scientific, financial, regulatory, supply chain as they go through the development life cycle.
Yes. So we talked about adaptability before. You can also call it nimbleness. It's about, knowing the assumptions you're working with. You're making the best decision you can, or you're taking the best choices that you can at a time based on a certain assumption. And you may be going back in the future and saying, that was not such a good idea. Well, if you have documented your assumption, you know which starting point you were at. From there, you actually define the risk. And the risk that I think is inherent to the modality that we're taking, because again, cell therapy is very, very complex, is the scientific and technical risk, the clinical output that is going to come from a product that we're trying to develop. We try to do our best as scientists, as defining the best construct, the best cell gene therapy that we can put in the patient. It doesn't work all the time. That's product development. We know that. So that risk is, I would say, the maximum that we try to avoid. Obviously, it's harm to the patient. This is not what we're trying to do. But the efficacy is the one where we don't necessarily know what is going to happen for reasons that have to do with an animal model, the in vitro data, the possibility of doing translation from the early stage to the patient. We try to, regulatory-wise, again, engaging the agency early and really have an understanding of their thinking and what's evolving. There was some recent publication around, being a little bit more nimble, maybe changing the way we actually progress cell therapy through the regulatory path and not being so rigid. I'm like, okay, that's something to consider. That's a different notion of risk. And that's opening doors for conversation. Cell therapy also, from an operational standpoint, I mentioned earlier, the risk should be minimized. You're looking for operational excellence. It's not a risk zero, but it's a system that absorbs the risk and learn from issues and mitigations that you actually put in place because you want to be prepared and really smooth the way of the production. And from a supply chain, as we grow through the life cycle, meaning you want to not be stuck. If we say that this way, COVID taught a lot of lessons around supply chain and made people pause about, okay, where is my stuff coming from? How do I continue to produce? And where is the diversity of my vendors in place that I actually do not disrupt my supply chain? So it's about really evolving those risks, revisiting your assumption, challenging your mitigation, and continuing to advance, keeping in mind the timeline. And that all boils down to financial. How much risk do you want to take? Some companies are very nimble. Startups are financially taking a lot of risk, and they may not succeed. A company like Regeneron have a little bit less financial risk, but they put the risk somewhere else. And so this is a culture of the company and how you adapt it. And so this is also why cell and gene therapy is kind of fascinating, because there's a place where we can actually reduce the risk and keep evolving as a community and as a company within a certain domain.
Fascinating. So you've done a really good job of talking about organizational structure processes. Let's talk about talent. So what are some talent strategies that can help organizations attract, retain, and develop the workforce they need to advance modalities in cell and gene therapy?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of an experience in hiring and retaining that is enjoyable by the candidate and the new employee. The onboarding should be as smooth as possible. Now, it's not always the case, but we try to actually do better. I think it's important to also provide to the individual when that individual has been attracted to the company is really an experience that is in line with what was promised. You need to be able to demonstrate, hopefully before that the person signs on the letter, that what you're actually selling as a vision is what is being experienced by people in the company. And so having that, I would say, alignment of notions is really important. The other aspect of what is important is cultivating the workforce in a sense that we want to provide opportunities to grow. Training, conferences, learning is important, and learning needs to be also coming from other sources than the internal source, because in cell and gene therapy, the speed by which things evolve and ideas pop up cannot be only managed internally. You need to be actually seeing the rest of the world and talking to other people and seeing what they do to actually, seed your own thinking and learning and growing. When you hire people, I would say you have to know what the minimums are. For example, in
Minimums?
manufacturing, aseptic manufacturing is for us a basic requirement. We are not going to go back and teach that. Okay. We can take somebody who does cell culture, even if it's not cell culture in cell therapy, but as aseptic training and saying, you know what, we'll train you on the modality, but some fundamentals have to be there.
Right.
A quality person is coming with a certain profile. There is a certain mentality around the rigor and the procedure and an enjoyment around that. That's where you find people. One of the thing that I tend to do as well is listening to what people do over their career and try to move them as they evolve, because there are things that they discover they're more interested in. So it's also listening to what the person is doing and evolving them, and evolving their career with them to make sure that the talent is retained and still serve the corporation for the mission that it has.
Earlier on, you were talking about the concept of psychological safety. So let's talk a little bit about how leaders can cultivate that and open communication, especially when it's a high pressure environment and failure is common and it's costly.
So when I was reflecting on that particular question, I'm like, I hope the failure is not costly. Going back to the comment we made earlier, if you have actually anticipated the risk and being comfortable with the risk will not be costly so much, because you're like, I am accepting that risk. It may fail, and it's something that we're going to absorb.
Yeah,
right?
it's relative.
Yes, it's a relative, absolutely. Failure is common, yes, and I think it's important that we accept failure. I'm a big proponent of learning from failure, so that's always been something that I've been attracted to or pioneer or emphasized. I think it's demonstrating as a leader the values that you want to have. And we talked about integrity, we talked about accountability, we talked about transparency, and I think authenticity. And I think that's what it is. It's about creating that possibility of listening to people and communicating appropriately. Now, I was reminding recently about share language. I don't think it exists. When you talk to a regulatory agency, when you talk to investors, when you talk to scientists, or when you talk to stakeholders, it's not the same language. And I think that it's always important to remind ourselves that in communication, we communicate to somebody. We're not communicating for ourselves. And I think that's where the development of a matured communication is really important. We have regular touch point in my organization. We have open survey. People can be ranting on it. That's fine. We look at it on a regular basis and we try to address it, always acknowledging that the question has been asked, that the concern has been voiced, and whether we can change it or not, we at least acknowledge the position and acknowledge the question. So that's how we create this. Failure is not a personal problem. Failure is often a process, a method, something that is from the infrastructure. So it's not about the person who is making the mistake. It's about how do we got there and what do we learn from this? So going back to a point I was making earlier, learning from what is not happening, what is not working is really important. And there are scientific learning from failures that we can use for product development to go back and make it better the next time around.
Yep. Okay. Makes sense. Let's take a hard turn. I want to talk about digital infrastructure, AI, automation, data governance. What role does that play across R&D, CMC, and clinical operations?
So it's a very popular topic. Everybody is talking about AI.
Oh yeah.
Even AI is talking to AI. So,
Yeah, that's right.
so it goes back to data. I think that as an industry in general, biotech has made a tremendous headway in terms of data integrity, data contract, all of the management of the data. But in cell and gene therapy, we have a unique challenge in a sense that we often deal with very small data set clinically. But we can generate a lot of data in various parts of the product life cycle. So you start with, for example, in autologous cell therapy, which I am mostly involved with, you start with the cell that are coming from the patient, you modify them into your process, and then you re-inject them. And so if you start looking at the data comprehensively across that product life cycle from patient back to the patient, the number of data points might not be in each iteration small, but there may be a story that you can actually mine through the entire product. And so that's where, data consolidation, data lake, data mining, sharing, formatting the data, and really making that data available across the various scientific part of the organization to look at this. The clinical organization might be looking at something different than, the manufacturing person. And really having the possibility of monitoring as instantly as possible, as quickly as possible. You can ideally make informed decisions. We're not there yet. It's not necessarily something we do, but being very diligent in the maintenance of your data, the mining of your data, and talking about the data is important for us to, again, learn from what we're doing, the modification we're doing in cell and gene therapy to actually inform, what is the process? We had an hypothesis. Does it do what's supposed to do, or is it going into something else? And the patient material may be changing. Does that change what we do and how it's going to come across? So that's where AI, the data lake, the automation, the workflows, we're big on dashboard. We're publishing regularly dashboard about what we see. And people are invited to look at it, not modify it, look at it and get a sense of what is happening. And that gives us I would say, a privileged view of what data is giving us. So we're raising the bar in terms of complexity, the size of the data set that we are actually handling. Still way to go, but this is where we are going. And I think that's where the industry is going. And it's exciting having tools that actually allow us to do that.
Yeah, well, it's moving very fast, so everybody needs to keep pace.
Absolutely.
We were talking about risk a little earlier. I want to talk a bit about quality and compliance. How can organizations ensure that their quality is good, they're in compliance while they're scaling these complex manufacturing operations?
So we talked about adaptability, we talked about nimbleness. I think it's about also having a view of the endpoint, start work with the end in mind. We know that commercially the book is set. We know what the regulations are. Yes, they are not necessarily applicable or applied directly to cell and gene therapy, but we know where the regulatory agencies are going to. We can
Mhm.
predict what type of demand we're going to be having to fulfill. We also know that as that part of the biotech matures, the bar is going to be raising. So we kind of have conceptually an understanding of what is it that we need to do. Also, there has been approval in cell and gene therapy, so there are references, there are already standards to meet.
Mm.
And so the idea is really to try to figure out where we are in the development life cycle. We spend in my organization more time into the phase one, but we anticipate the later stage. We think about, okay, how are we going to manufacture? How
Mm.
are we going to scale out? What type of technology do we want to use? A big conversation we have is, are we using the traditional tried and true CMO process where, you go and you don't build your own manufacturing
Right.
facility, but you use a provider, a service provider, and there are excellent ones out there, and work with them, or you go for something a little bit more innovative and
Mm.
technology oriented and things that are more enclosed, that are more robotic. And so obviously that's a different paradigm, but you have to anticipate this. It solves a different type of problem. It's a different type of risk and different type of assumption to notions that we're talking about. But it's kind of, okay, how do we prepare for this?
Mm.
So as we build the compliance, we looked into, okay, what is the compliance of the company? We audit, we look, we entertain partnership, and
Mm.
then we look at those new technology. Are they going to fulfill the expected requirements of a later stage? Can we confidently go to the agency and say, are you ready to accept this thing? If we show you that what we were doing manually is the same, give the same output that what we're doing automatically. So
Right.
it's about really being proactive and we're anticipating what we are likely to see when we move into that those later stage.
Yeah. Well, we talked about technology, risk, quality, compliance, a lot of different topics. Bring that together a little bit. Let's talk about integration.
Yep.
What would you say are some of the best practices that can help leaders maintain alignment with scientists, investors, regulatory bodies, commercial stakeholders, etc.?
Yeah. So I would say, and it will not be surprising for anybody who knows Regeneron, everything comes down to data.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very big on data, very big on scientific understanding and scientific excellence. So that's where, this is where you can actually start bringing everybody and saying, okay, this is the data that we are basing our discussion upon. And it's how you interpret it and how you present it. And so what is the development story? What is the explanation, the why, the how? And how you communicate this. So best practices is really, again, back to the regulatory agencies in engaging for any type of questions, there are meetings that you can ask and interactions that you can have with regulatory agencies when you can ask questions, when you can actually say, we're thinking about this, we have this type of data, and it's not committing. Give us your opinion. Type C meetings are very good for that type of ideas. Scientists, again, it's about communication. Again, data. Scientists from different part of the organization, cross-functionally, are looking at the data, may come with different type of explanation. And I think that allows us to entertain the progress of the development. You can actually see how we come up with, oh, I didn't think about that particular explanation. In the world of cell therapy, because it's cross-functional, you start with the product, again, autologous, with the cells of a patient, you go back to the cell of the patient, and you keep iterating with different patients. This is really a conversation that is cross-functional. the nature of the data and the integrity of the data is the best practice for us to maintain that alignment. And then there is the idea of convincing the investors and the commercial stakeholders. So depends on the season. Okay.
Sure.
We may be a little bit figuratively and not in winter right now, but because expectations have changed. But I think that going back to the fundamentals, the data, I think that cell therapy has potentially matured a little bit more and is now in a phase where this consolidation, there are choices that are being made, the conversation becomes a little bit more serious. And maybe that's opening a different venue for developing more of those exciting modalities.
You were talking earlier about learning from things that are happening in the organization. I want to kind of zone in a little bit on learning as it pertains to specifically experiments, failures, near misses, and what can you garner from that to make sure that you're constantly improving and accelerating your development operation?
Yeah, so I think that the philosophy we follow and I prefer is really kind of coming from the quality side, where there is a clear understanding on how you actually look for root cause and you look for learning and you actually combine that with continuous improvement. And that becomes, I would say, a self-propelled system. All right. And so this is something that we're very big on. In my organization, I have called out a continuous improvement very early on and saying this is a big thing that I want to see everywhere, because in operation and in development, because we need to learn from failure. We are going to fail. I have absolutely no doubt that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yeah.
And with that, and there's no shame in failing. As an analytical development person, I was not happy when an experiment was working the first time and I didn't know why. It was a little bit frustrating. And so that has stayed with me. I'm like, I like to understand why things do work. And so this is type of the same philosophy where in some ways you have to understand and give yourself time. Not always easy when you're doing a release testing of a cell therapy batch and you're like, I have to do a root cause analysis on my OOS and I am not sure what's happening. But then, rapid response team, call in all the various SMEs and have those open conversation around, okay, how do we take care of this particular failure? Because we all own it and we're all going to solve it.
Yeah. It can be really discouraging when you're kind of constantly going through and failing and you want to see some successes, and everything that we've covered in this podcast. I mean, it's a lot to manage. It's a lot to handle. So let's talk about just resiliency. How can leaders manage the burnout and the decision fatigue and maintain long-term vision while they're dealing with all of this and steering teams through scientific and operational complexity?
Yeah, I think actually my answer is probably going to be for everybody, because in that realm, I think that everybody is a leader. Cell therapy is one of the most fascinating modality because I'm not sure, particularly in the autologous aspect of it, I'm not sure there is any other modality where you literally, when you are on the manufacturing floor or in the QC lab, you're holding the patient life in your hand. And I think that is a tremendous amount of responsibility, and the teams are extremely committed to that because they know that the patient is really looking to getting the product and hoping that it's going to give a cure. So for me, it's about really, there's a lot of self-awareness. And knowing where is the bar or the line that you don't want to cross, and everybody's different. And trying to really give yourself time to step back. It's balancing for leaders. It's balancing okay, what is the vision? Where are my values? How do I re-anchor myself when something went sideways? And what do I take from that to communicate my renewed enthusiasm to the rest of my team and saying, I still believe in the vision, I still believe in the mission, and this is how I'm thinking we're going to be seeing it. So it's about maybe vulnerability and authenticity, speaking from your own experience and encouraging people to explore their own journey. And I think it's important to look at making time for one's priority. Okay, a job like cell therapy can be all encompassing. It can be just sucking a lot of time because it's complicated, as many
Yeah.
other biotech people will know. But we have families, we have hobbies, we want me time, and I think it's important to at some point respect the time outside of the working hours and saying, nope, we're not going to do this. It will wait until tomorrow, or sustain and support the manufacturing team and the quality teams that are working often around the clock when they are in production and may not have a holiday weekend because a patient material came in and we need to take care of it. So it's recognizing that we're all human and making space for it. And really, again, speaking from, we're not machine, we are here for doing a mission, but it's not a marathon where you're going to be dying at the end of the day. It's a series of sprints.
Right.
And this is about pacing yourself through the sprint and sometimes calling for help. It's like,
Yeah.
I can't do it all. I'm at my limit, and accepting that somebody else can help.
Well, you're also
So
doing the organization disservice when you're exhausted. So it's
absolutely,
in everybody's best
absolutely.
interest to make sure that you're managing that.
Absolutely. And,
Mhm.
and it's also how you operate your organization. Very big on empowerment and giving the ability of people within the organization to make the decision that they can make and not having to worry about them and trusting them with that. And, that gives me time to, particularly myself, to do other things that more within the realm of what I do. So
Okay, well, that's another podcast.
that's another
Um,
podcast indeed.
well, this has been a really, really informative session. I really appreciate you taking the time. Before we close, what would you like to leave the audience with?
What I want to leave the audience with? Well, that's a trick question. Well, I think, again, I chose cell and gene therapy for reasons because scientifically it was the most complicated and still very much complicated for me on a day-to-day basis, but also a place where, again, we are very close to the patient, and I think that relationship really spoke to me in terms of really trying to change the fate of cancer. And
Hmm.
so I hope that in addition to listening to this podcast, the audience find a place for themselves where they can actually experience the joy that I have not lost for all those years working in biotechnology and now in cell and gene therapy.
Well, you're glowing, Nelly. So
Thank
that's a
you.
fact. Well, again, really appreciate it. For everybody listening, as always, if you find conversations like this valuable, please share it with a colleague or your professional network. Subscribe to get updates of new episodes at thefdagroup.com/podcast and follow the FDA Group on LinkedIn for industry updates and cutting edge insights. If you'd like to talk about project or resource needs, just head over to thefdagroup.com to get in touch, or feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all in the next rundown.